Hello and welcome to another special episode of Lunch on Us, where we'll be discussing some of the current events, especially happening here in Selangor and the Klang Valley. I'm your host, Ida Nadira, and with me, my co-host, Masha Mohsen. And last week, we looked into some of the major events that happened in Selangor in 2025. So this time around, we're going to discuss the upcoming happenings in Selangor for 2026, because there are a lot of things that's going to be happening, especially the Malaysia Games, Sukma 2026. Now, before we get into that, joining us today is Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad Chief Economist, and JJ Dennis, Press Secretary to the Selangor Minteri Besar. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you again, one more time.
Yes, again, back to back. Okay. Right. So last week we talked about the economic outlook of Selangor for the past year in 2025, and now entering 2026, there's this thing where the Menteri Besar will be tabling, which is the Selangor Second Plan, succeeding the first Selangor Plan, which is a 5-year blueprint by the state government. Now, according to the first Selangor Plan, or for short, RS1, according to its dashboard, the progress status of the plan is currently at 72.8%, while the projects, programs and initiatives, or PPIs, that have been fully completed is at 26% out of 282 PPIs. So this translates to about 10 projects that have yet to even start. But before we get into these numbers, Dr. Afzanizam, I believe that you have looked into some of the key figures of this plan, especially the major achievements. Maybe you can share a bit on that.
Sure. I did some digging in terms of the RS1, especially the midterm review on the RS1, and try to map it on the with the actual performance. I must say, in short, it has been quite very decent. Most of them, in terms of macroeconomic targets, has been exceed the targets. For instance, GDP growth, the target between 2021 to 2025 is about 6.5% to 7%. But the actual average growth between 2021 up until 2024 is about 7.3%. And then in terms of approved investment, the target is around 23 billion to 35 billion. And the actual average between 2021 until first 9 months of 2025 is about 59.6 billion.
Yeah.
Median household income, the target is 9,290 ringgit. 9290 by 2025, but the actual performance in 2024 is about 10,726 ringgit. The only thing that I think is lagging behind is the absolute poverty.
Yeah.
The target is 0.5%, but the actual for 2025 is about 0.9%. So I think in general, they are very much exceeded the target, and I think it makes a good foundation for the second round in terms of RS2 perhaps. Yeah.
JJ, correct me if I'm wrong, JJ. During the recent State Assembly, I think YB Datuk Seri Menteri Besar also did mention about absolute poverty and eradicating poverty in general in Selangor. You work very closely with the Menteri Besar, right? So in the meetings, in the EXCO meetings, like how often do the issue of poverty, especially what Doctor mentioned about absolute poverty, how often do these issues get discussed in these meetings?
It's the number one priority. Poverty, there's hardcore poverty, there's absolute poverty. We've had some success in quote-unquote eradicating hardcore poverty because the baseline was you have to completely eliminate, and this is not only in Selangor, even the Prime Minister has said it a number of times from his first budget speech in 2022. So that was our focus, to ensure that there's no one living in a condition which is hardcore poverty. Now, then we have an issue of relative poverty and also urban poverty. Our challenge is now on urban poverty, which I think is about 8.9 to 9.2%, because that will take into account cost of living, how much your salaries are, how much disposable income you have. And in Selangor, each household spends more than one quarter of the income on housing, electricity, water, and then another 23.5% on food outside the house. So going to restaurants or hotels. And the other component, which is on buying of raw ingredients, so your food and drinks. So these three things make up more than 62% of any individual household's expenditure. So our thing is on to focus to try to cap or reduce the increase on that as much as possible. So one of the main things which MB did this year for next year's budget is to ensure this thing called people who can work but are unable to. So meaning their age means they can work, but they can't work because of a health issue, because they might have been removed from their job, and they are categorized as a non-productive working age. So they can work, but their physical condition or economical condition doesn't allow them to work. So we've allocated about almost 6 million ringgit to ensure that these people get about 300 ringgit every month or 3,600 ringgit every year to top up whatever they need so that their housing and food is taken care of.
Yeah.
So
This is part
was the main priority even up in this budget, because there's not much value if we focus on economic growth, but there are still people living in hardcore poor standards.
Okay. But what is actually missing here? Because, if we look at the dashboard, there are projects that still need to be completed.
Right.
But then at the same time, like Dr. Afzal Nizam mentioned just now, like there are targets that have exceeded the actual goal. So maybe you can share a bit, like what could be the possible causes of why some of the projects have not even started or yet to complete?
So there are two things. One is a lot of these projects, as opposed to a national budget planning, which is yearly. The Selangor plan is more of a medium to long-term approach. So it's geared towards a longer-term realization. For example, the Shah Alam Stadium. In that category, actually, it is calculated as not having started. But the demolition works took about 13 to 14 months. And that has to be done in a longer format because of its location in the heart of the city. Surrounding areas were residential areas, so they couldn't use a faster way to remove the current structure to build. The second thing we realized is in the first Selangor plan, we had an issue not so much of planning, but financing of the projects. So this, as opposed to how the Malaysia plan is formulated, the Malaysia plan usually is mainly government projects up till the 12th Malaysia plan. The 13th Malaysia plan, the federal government actually did a combination of public projects and also private initiatives, which was done even in the first Selangor plan. So it's a plan which incorporates government's plan, the private sector, and also socio-economic measures to improve living standards, household income. But we realized that companies were reluctant to put down their money if there is no government commitment or government backing. So this is something we're trying to overcome in the second Selangor plan, because we learned from our experience. The first time ever we come up with a plan of this sort, to ensure that the major projects actually have a financing mechanism. Give it the stadium, for example. Initially, we thought and estimated, this was during the COVID years, 2021, 2022, because the plan is 2021, was only tabled in 2022. It will take about 790 to 850 million to build just a stadium component. After that happened, we realized that it shouldn't just be the stadium, but that area needed flood mitigation planning, and then how to make the stadium not only as a sports arena, but as a area for performing arts, to hold other events, and then to make it also a transport hub for Shah Alam. And now the cost has gone up to 4 times. So this will have an impact on how we plan financially, how we allocate our funds. Initially, it was through a land swap approach. Now we have to come up with other measures, because it's not enough just to swap land to make up the value. So these kind of things are the things we learned on the job, and we are trying to rectify and overcome this to ensure that there's more financing, or the clearer financing in the Second Selangor Plan, so that companies also know that whenever they put their money down, the government actually is committed to infrastructure in new areas, or helping them improve their business processes like we did through the Speed Selangor policy.
Yeah, understood. And when we talk about Selangor, I think it's almost impossible not to mention this name.
Yeah.
Datuk Sri Muhammad Azmin Ali,
Right.
opposition leader, former Menteri Besar of Selangor. Last month during the state sitting, quite interesting banter between him and Datuk Rizam Ismail, one of the excos. He did mention about Sabda, Sabak Bernam development area.
Yes.
And I think he said something like, "Oh, there's a lot of projects under Sabda that has not been completed, and that this is proof that RS1 is a failure and those sorts lah." Just wanted to get maybe JJ or maybe even Dr. Afzan Nizam, your thought. Medium-term plans, like not completing all of the projects under a medium-term plan like RMK and even RS1. Like, is it considered a failure? And is it common for some of the major projects like Sabda to take to do the implementation takes maybe 2 or 3 plans to be fully completed?
Yeah, I guess the 5-year window perhaps is too short. And as what mentioned by JJ just now about how the Shah Alam Stadium should be demolished, that requires time, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So I think we need to be realistic in terms of the timeline. And there are various considerations such as the environmental impact assessment and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of consideration that needs to be taken into account, and therefore to simplify it as whether it succeed or fail, then I think it's too simplistic.
Yeah.
And then I think it's unfair lah. What matters is I think the plan are very clear, and some of the macro targets can be met. I think it's on the right direction, and it's only right that this RS2 needs to be continued to the next round. So I think that's where RS2.
So from an outsider point of view, Doctor, if I can just
Sure.
ask, what would the score be? Would you give to the state government's implementation of RS1? But taking into consideration the fact that this is the first state in Malaysia that has come up with any sort of a medium-term plan like this.
I would say 85% score.
Right. MB must be smiling right now.
Being the first, and then I must say it's a commendable efforts, because what it provides more clarity for at least for investors. Yeah,
Right,
I've noticed the stockbroking houses, some of the broking houses covering stories on RS1 previously. So I think this visibility in terms of informations, how is this being disseminated, then it can create further awareness about what's the trajectory for Selangor economy.
Yeah.
So, okay, Doctor, as we all know, the RS2 is scheduled to be tabled mid of 2026, and as a continuation of RS1, and for someone who has thoroughly seen the progress of RS1 from the start and until they tabled the midterm review. So what do you think, what could be some of the focus areas for RS2, and what should be the priorities?
I guess it's pretty much the priorities will be pretty much similar. I mean, it will be on the high growth, high value kind of areas. We talk about renewable energies, we talk about technology, we talk about artificial intelligence, and in addition to that, we talk about food security. Yeah, so I think it's going to be a continuation from RS1, and perhaps how this plan should be accelerated, because we don't have the luxury of time, considering the global uncertainties that we are facing in, and looking at how the trade tensions going to evolve going forward remain unclear, and therefore areas such as perhaps food security is an important area to be looked at. At least we can improve our self-sufficiency. For instance, rice. I think now we are currently running at around 70%. I remember in my interactions with Professor Ulung Raja Rasya, he told me that during Tun Abdul Razak's time, the self-sufficiency level for rice, it was 86%, much higher than it is now. So I think it is only right that the agro-food sector needs to be looked at, and of course it will be leveraging on technology. And by technology, it means how we can attract talent, especially the young ones, into this sector.
Yeah. Also, JJ, you did mention just now a bit earlier about what improvements could be made to RS1, and you mentioned about how to better manage the finances, identifying proper. Yeah. So for RS2, apart from this, like what other areas that the state has been looking at or will be implementing under RS2?
We are looking at this from a problem-solving point of view. What are the main problems we have? Like we spoke in the previous episode, flooding. Flooding is still a major concern, which needs bigger work on a bigger scale and also faster. That's one thing. So how we better adapt to climate change. The second thing will be how to deal better, more efficiently with waste management. So waste collection, and also after collecting, how do we manage it without relying on landfills? So in February to March next year, the first waste to energy plant in Jeram is coming up. Selangor produces about 7,000 tons of waste a day, single day. The Jeram plant, phase 1 and 2, can take about 5,000 tons a day. So we will still need to build another waste to energy plant to ensure that we keep only with yesterday's demand, not future demand. So future demand, it could go up to 8,000 tons, possibly to 10,000 if you look at the trajectory of population increase, both birth rates, not so much birth rates, but inflow of population from people in other states into Selangor. So the statistics department estimates that our population will go up to 8.1 million by 2050. So that's about 800,000 increase from today's numbers. Based on that, we estimate at least 9,000 to 10,000 tons of waste a day. So you need more waste to energy plants. Second is, without disposing much of our produce, how do we increase recycling? So the circular economy has to be developed. We haven't mentioned anything about the First Selangor Plan on how we build the ecosystem that will focus on these two areas. A third will be adapting to a more aging population. How do we provide sufficient care services and to make Selangor child-friendly and also age-friendly? Then also looking into people with disabilities, how do they access government departments, shopping malls, public services, public parks, so that there's more space for recreation and leisure for people in a area where the economy is the number one talk. But we talked about earlier, it shouldn't all just be numbers. There should be sufficient people to enjoy their lifestyle and also people to relax, to meet the demands of an urbanized lifestyle.
At this rate, as of today, what's the progress of RS2? Is it ready for tabling?
The final word, the final line is not done yet, but I think we are about 95% there. We should be able to complete the document by January, and then I foresee it being tabled. Of course, this has to be approved by the boss. Maybe the second sitting of next year.
May or June.
Yes, because we expect that because of Ramadan being earlier next year, it is unlikely we'll have a sitting in February or March. So the first sitting will be in April.
Oh, okay.
Second sitting is likely June or July. So that will be where it will be tabled.
Okay. So when we talk about RS1, RS2, this is medium-term
Yes.
efforts. So we must also talk about the Selangor state budget.
Right.
But before we go into some of the state efforts in generating new revenue, Dr. Azaniza, maybe you can share a bit because previously you came up with the report on the recent Selangor State Budget 2026. So maybe you can share a bit of your thoughts on like what stood out and what is that you find interesting in the recent state budget.
Yeah, among the key things that I found it very interesting is that the Selangor state government efforts to diversify its revenue stream.
Yeah.
It talks about the master plan of dark fiber.
Dark fiber master plan.
And then it talks about the charge on
Yeah.
water discharge,
Zero discharge policy.
right? And then contribution from SOE's dividends. So these are the efforts being put forward to ensure that the revenue stream of state government will remain sustainable going forward. And I like to commend this. And then, of course, these are not an easy feat, especially when your ability to tax is very much almost limited, lah, right? So I think it's only right that this effort needs to be done, lah. And then among the things as well, of course, the budget itself, lah, the size of the budget keeps on rising. That would mean state government of Selangor will continue to remain expansionary. I notice they're expecting deficit spending for 2026. So I think it's the right strategy at a time when we know the degree of economic uncertainties globally has become heightened. So overall the plan looks good, lah, to be executed.
We are going to touch more about the new sources of revenue, but before that, I would just like to get JJ, if you could share, based on what Dr. Afzal Nizam have said, like what does this say about Datuk Menteri Besar's leadership, and also I'm just curious to know, like, how involved was the MB at the different stages of the budget preparation, because I think this is not something that many people know.
He, as opposed to many people I have known and worked with, he's extremely hands-on. So if people who talk to him also, they say he has a knack of understanding details, and that shows in his work ethic. He's very hands-on, and I think the civil service team in Selangor is used to that style of leadership, because as hands-on as he is, he also empowers the economic planning unit to come up with plans. So he does not focus, unlike maybe the previous Menteri Besar, he doesn't get involved into micromanaging. But he understands the details, and he also empowers at the same time, which I think is critical to have a civil service who not only takes orders but understands and has the capacity to plan forward. This is, I think, is crucial into adding value, because then you can not have to rely on consultants from outside. It's increased capacity of the civil service.
Greater trust on the
That's
civil
right.
servants.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One also, if I can just add another question, because I was just saying just now how we can how I was going to ask more about the new revenue sources. You did mention about the dark fiber master plan, and I think MB did also mention about tourism sustainability fee, which will be introduced next year, and then venturing into creative economy, and you did mention about zero discharge policy and all that. So just curious, are these revenue sources when we look at in terms of like longer term? Obviously, when land revenue, these are for me quite sustainable, because government always get, like in terms of taxes, premiums and all that. But these new ventures that the state is going into, how sustainable is it? Doctor, would you like to share?
This is something that every state would want to try to address, lah. If you look at, I also look at Sarawak state budget recently, and I can see the revenue stream trajectory has been on the high side, lah, since they are able to tax or to impose a sales tax on petroleum. So from 2020 up until 2026, the trajectory on average is about 11 billion in terms of revenue stream, as opposed to prior to the introduction of the sales tax on petroleum, which is about 7 billion. So that's a very big shift in terms of the trajectory of the revenue stream. So in the case of Selangor, of course, ideally, if the Selangor government can actually have that ability to tax, then that could actually help a lot in terms of how we can sustain its revenue stream going forward. But I think this is something that it needs to be discussed.
And before we came in, actually, we did had a short discussion about how the state could actually introduce even more new sources of revenue. And there's not much, because a lot of it is under the federal government's responsibility. Just curious, Doctor, or maybe JJ, if you could share, like what other potential new sources of revenue that the state government could consider. And just to note, Datuk Menteri Besar previously did mention about or did suggest to the federal government about potentially returning back some portion of the corporate tax paid to the federal government to the states. Perhaps both of you could share on this.
Actually, on the corporate tax part, I think his idea, the MB's idea, was to come up with a more sustainable system of federalism, so that states don't rely completely on land. That is the problem states, especially in Semenanjung,
Right, yeah.
besides Terengganu, which gets some royalty on petroleum. The other states have to rely on land, and state like Selangor and perhaps even Penang, land is becoming finite every passing day.
Yeah.
So there will come a time where you don't have much greenfield to develop anymore. You have to rely on brownfield. That was the idea of the corporate tax sharing idea which MB proposed. Not too big, only 2% of the entire revenue which the federal government gets from corporate tax, so that each state will then come up with policies to be more business friendly, to support the SMEs to grow better, because every 100 ringgit the federal government gets, the states can then get 2 ringgit. So then you have healthy competition across the states to drive forward SMEs. So you should not only depend on the Klang Valley's economy, but states like Perak, which was booming in the 70s and 80s, but has not had a second lease of life after mining. How Malacca will not just rely on tourism, but also develop the SMEs. Johor doesn't have to rely only on data centers, but expand to higher tech instead of being a feeder to Singapore. So these kind of things, each state can have their own localized approach to developing SMEs to all achieve the national agenda.
What about Dr. Azimizam? What do you think about this?
Sure, I'm probably looking from the federal government point of view. So I think they need to look at their strategy on how, on the federal side, on how they can actually make sure that the revenue stream will become more sustainable. And in this regard, definitely to have more share from indirect taxes would be an ideal target. By indirect tax, what I mean is that it's actually the perhaps the reintroduction of GST, which has been discussed in the public domain. Of course, this can be somewhat taboo, but it is what it is. It's something that we need to be clear about it. And I think our Prime Minister did say about this. I mean, he did not really rejected the idea of GST. It's just perhaps finding the right time, the right avenue. But if you look at the past performance of GST, you can see that the share of the indirect taxes when it was implemented from 2015 until 2018, the share of indirect taxes hit 35%. Some scholars say that the ideal share between direct and indirect tax should be around 50-50. So during the GST punya period, is like they are going to that direction. But then after that, of course, the share of indirect tax has gone down. But then the expansion of SST scope, of course, they are expecting a greater share lah. But still, it cannot match the GST contribution. So I think perhaps by having GST at some point in the future, that will make our federal government revenue more sustainable. Then perhaps by that time, they are more open to these suggestions.
Giving back to the state.
Yes.
Okay. So just now we discussed about how the federal government can also support state governments in terms of taxing. So speaking of, several initiatives in place have actually helped Selangor to position itself not just on the national level but also on the in the region, the ASEAN region. So, for example, we have the Selangor International Business Summit, which is an annual summit by the state government, and for 2026, as mentioned in the state budget, it's actually planning to go global. And this is quite interesting because we want to know further what does it mean by going global. And aside from regional, there's also the Central Region Initiative, where we see this collaboration between Selangor, Negeri Sembilan, Melaka, and Federal Territories. So maybe Doctor or JJ, you can probably share whether you think if this is the right step to take for the state government.
Right. On the SIBS point, Selangor has organized the business summit for 10 years now, since 2015. Of course, the COVID year, the first year we didn't have anything.
Yes.
This year was the 10th year. It has come to a very mature point of view where these days, if you go outside to the business community, you don't have to really explain what SIBS is about. They more or less know, especially if you operate in the food and beverage or the E&E or the manufacturing sector.
Okay.
Our next chapter or next step to move on is not so much in creating micro or small companies, but how to allow small companies to scale to an SME level between the 5 million to 50 million revenue bracket. It's okay getting from 0 to 5 million. Most people can do that. Then the second challenge will be how to make it sustainable. Two is how to expand your markets. So that by taking SIBS outside to the second cities of Southeast Asia, so not so much Bangkok, Manila, but Cebu, Chiang Mai in Thailand, Bandung in Indonesia, perhaps even Laos, and an extension to celebrate the 11th member of ASEAN, Timor. These are options we're looking at over the next 5 years, one country each year, so that the critical industries, critical companies in Selangor which we feel have room to scale up can then start exporting and looking at these markets in Southeast Asia to expand their markets, to sell their products. Because most of them, most of the companies in Selangor in the aerospace sector or in the automotive manufacturing sector are not known that much.
Yeah.
They have an issue of exposure, they have an issue of marketing. So by using the SIBS brand and tagging them along, I think they will have an opportunity to expand further so that we have a larger pool of SMEs within Selangor who are not just stuck in the micro to small medium level.
Yeah, and MB has consistently said about how his goal is basically to make Selangor compete at the regional level or even compete with across
For
Asia.
sure. Yes.
Yeah, and I think one of his speeches he did mention about his dream of making Selangor the economic powerhouse of Asia, competing with the likes of Tokyo, for example, Jakarta. So ambitious, yes, but my question is whether this is achievable, and how long do you think this will take before Selangor can compete with the likes of, let's say, Tokyo, Doctor?
I think it's interesting because it's come to a point where we should not just be content with being Malaysia's number one state.
Yeah.
That I think there's not much debate on that. So not to sound arrogant, but the numbers speak for themselves. It's how do you scale from there? Looking into how Seoul has managed to do it, how Tokyo has managed to do it, and even a much newer example like Shenzhen in China. 20 years ago, Shenzhen was never spoken of as a tech hub. If you look at further south, the port of Hainan today operates so many goods across the straits into China. But it's not that Selangor does it alone. We are looking at it from a Southeast Asian context because we look at the potential for Southeast Asia to grow, which is the fastest growing region in the world. Population 680 million, slated to go to 750 million by 2030. Of course, diverse in language, but capacity in, if you look at Thailand, if you look at Vietnam, how fast Vietnam has grown. It's not so much about outdoing them, but using Selangor as a gateway so that companies not only see when you want to invest to Malaysia, you go to other states, but you come to Selangor first. And then the same way, Selangor companies see these other states, these other countries or second cities as opportunities to expand their market because of salaries going up across the entire, of course, besides Myanmar, but the other countries across Southeast Asia.
Yeah, quite interesting because MB has consistently mentioned about the tagline, Selangor gateway to ASEAN.
Yes, that's right.
I think if you cover SIBS, you'll hear that. If you watch the budget tabling, you'll hear that. But why do you think like some states, I mean like most states in Malaysia, like what can they learn from Selangor that they did not implement now? Doctor, perhaps you can share your.
First, I think how they communicate their economic development strategy. I like RS1, for instance. That's how the state can actually formulate the economic development strategy and try to share with the public. And of course, the constituent would actually appreciate that. And then and go out and market it. So again, it's about how the state become more like a company. Where you have investor relations, then people get to know what's the direction going to be like.
Yeah.
So this is something that other state can try to emulate. And I think Sarawak government perhaps is moving into that direction. They are talking about the 5-year development plan recently. So I suppose there will be more tractions on this in this regards with other states as well going forward. Yeah.
All right.
All right. How about the Central Region initiative?
Yeah,
Like,
I think it makes sense lah. I mean, without it pun, you see, look at how because we are going more urbanized. You see,
Correct.
as we progress, the urbanization tends to go higher, and you can see how in the case of Kuala Lumpur and Negeri Sembilan, how the those who stays in KL now gradually starting to move to Nilai,
Right.
Seremban, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually we become more closer than
Yeah.
ever lah. So and on that note, I think to have a more organized central region that covers Selangor, KL, Negeri Sembilan and Melaka, it makes sense. Perhaps we try to compete with our guys in the down south, JSSEZ perhaps.
And there's even Northern Corridor Economic Zone as well.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I think that could actually, because what we need is a spark. You see, because this development would create more economic multipliers, and investors are watching in this space lah, where to put their money and where the capital is going to be needed. So I think these plans will actually create more vibrancies in terms of the economic developments. Yeah.
right. I'd like to move the attention away from. Well, we're not going to move away from economy, but we're going to talk about what I mentioned earlier, which is Malaysia Games, Sukma 2026. Now, of course, it's a sporting event, but at the same time, it does have some economic impact. And for major events like Sukma, there are perception that hosting these kind of events like Sukma, SEA Games, Commonwealth, it actually costs money, right? For example, Malaysia, we rejected hosting the Commonwealth because of insufficient funding, high cost, and then it's also short notice. So how do you see, like, what can states actually gain from hosting this, especially for Selangor, for Sukma 2026? What can we gain from it, and what is the impact on the state's economy?
I suppose it can promote domestic tourism.
Okay.
That will create the spillover effects to various sectors, logistic, accommodations, and F&B. Those are the benefits that can be gained from this event, and not to mention the spirits among our athletes as well. So I think those are the key areas that can be beneficial for state who organize such event lah.
Okay. As you mentioned, yes, we can support the economy through tourism, but although it's an opportunity to generate income, there is this one concern that people have in terms of infrastructure, which is the concern that it would be abandoned post games. For example, even if we look at the infra that we have now that we'll be using for Sukma 2026, for example, the aquatic center, only when we have decided that, okay, Selangor is going to host Sukma 2026, then they start refurbishing it. So what is the guarantee that this won't happen post Sukma 2026?
So it's about understanding that it's not solely building infrastructure but maintenance. I think
Yes.
Malaysia has long had a challenge from not prioritizing maintenance. So our culture for maintenance has suffered a lot.
Yeah.
This is what we're trying to improve in the Second Selangor Plan, so that public infrastructure by government, whether it's the state government or the local council or the district office, is better maintained. Sometimes we don't prioritize it as much, and we only see it when it comes to big events like this. So, like for example, the aquatic center, we're spending about 14 million just to refurbish its incredibly dilapidated condition. And to compete with what the private sector is offering, you need to have better facilities to make it sustainable. So this is what we've understood a bit late, but hopefully in time for the Malaysia Games. And this, I think, will also promote more younger people and encourage them to take up the sports more seriously. If there's more facilities on offer for
Right.
them to train, and then you will have in turn coaches coming in to see it as an industry to train more younger people. I think this will help in the long term. So it's all about understanding the importance of that.
Speaking of these venues, right, JJ, like what's the progress currently in terms of the refurbishing or the upgrading of the current venues? Because I think one of the main concerns I think was raised a couple of days ago by someone about Carlton Hotel as the esports venue
Right.
for Sukma. So what's the current progress for these venues?
Carlton Hotel is not for Sukma. So it's supposed to be, was envisioned to be an esports stadium. So that hotel is owned by the state government but has gone through 3 cycles of mismanagement. So that is targeted towards more 2030. So we are now finalizing the exact handover of land from the previous company who was operating it but has not operated it up to the level we have hoped for. And then that hotel will then be demolished because it's just difficult to work with the current space.
Yeah.
And then rebuilt from the ground up for to be functioned as a esports stadium, the first esports stadium I think in Malaysia, in time for the Islamic Solidarity Games in 2029.
So that will be the
That's
say
right.
the official
Yes.
launch of. All right. Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
So before we wrap up, under Datuk Sri Amiruddin's leadership, we saw there has been a lot of initiatives. For the first time, a state government actually came up with a midterm 5-year blueprint. And so basically we cannot end today's discussion without talking about continuity. So in both of your opinions, like how important is continuity in leadership? Because we have heard recently there's a lot of talks about change in
Yeah.
leadership, especially in Selangor.
and the
So,
candidates.
yeah,
I've-
potential
I've never heard anything.
candidates.
Never
JJ
heard
didn't
anything.
hear.
First time hearing about this.
How foolproof are these policies
Policies,
introduced under Datuk Sri Amiruddin's leadership?
Doc, you want to take it? Will I answer it?
Perhaps you can
I
start
think,
first,
I
JJ.
think
Yeah.
it's important. If a plan is good, I think no matter who brings it, it should stay. Of course, you also cannot deny the fact that as time moves by, there will always be room to improve on existing plans because these were taken or may have been envisioned in a certain point of time. So when time passes, you have always be open to the idea that things can be improved. And I think whoever is the next leadership, as has taken place even in the federal government, even there's been a change of government 3 times over the last 5 years. Not all plans have been changed. There have been certain fine tuning here and there, and that's normal for any democratic practice. And I think it will happen in Selangor as well.
Yeah.
Doctor, your last advice, doctor,
Sure.
for
I
those
think-
incoming.
Right. I think by institutionalizing the economic development is the way of minimizing the risk, lah. If there is any change in leadership, because when you table your 5-year plan, there is clear KPI to be achieved. Certainly, whoever person who takes who helm the states will be measured by these KPIs. And certainly, this new person needs to be, be on track about this, and to in order to look good, obviously they need to at least achieve whatever being stated in the plan. So I think the RS is actually a way of institutionalizing the economic development that would help to minimize the risk.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much
yeah,
for
yeah.
joining
Thank you.
us today. Looking forward to see what's in store for Selangor in 2026. Thank you again for joining the show. I'm Ida Nadira, and this is a wrap.